Hey guys, welcome to the 2 a.m. pipe on the patio. It's a beautiful day, nice and cool out today. Today I'm smoking my Briar Dude Brers Songwriter. This was made for me by the Briar Dude, old Pop's brother. Man, I love this pipe. Man. There's a chilly one out here today. And in it, I'm smoking some H&H Vintage Syrian. And this stuff is from 2017. And it is dry as a bone. So what I did was, I need to rehydrate this very badly. What I did was I put it in my pipe and then I blew through my pipe, just breathed through my pipe about 5 times. And my breath rehydrated the tobacco very nicely. It was actually very nicely hydrated after doing that. It was crispy when I put it in there. So I just put my thumb over the bowl and breathed about 5 times through the bowl. And just my breath alone rehydrated it really nicely. So there's a little tip for you if you ever have some tobacco that's really dry. Fill your pipe, breathe through the pipe, and your breath, the moisture in your breath will rehydrate that tobacco for you. This is wonderful. I had never got to smoke Syrian Latakia prior to this tin. By the time I started smoking Syrian Latakias, the Syrian was gone. And this is just some wonderful stuff. So I very rarely smoke this. Break that out when I have guests, and today I had it on my shelf out here in the living room, and it was on top of the case that I have this pipe in. So I figured, I gotta pair this up with this pipe. What a treat this stuff is. Perfect for a nice cool day, I'll tell you. So, second round of the baseball playoffs start today. I'm excited about that. I'll be pulling for the Padres, since my Giants aren't in it, and the Padres are my second favorite team in the National League. Having lived in San Diego since 1969, before moving here to Virginia in 2000. And I guess it was the end of 2000 we moved here. So in December of 2000 we moved here. So from 69 to 2000 I lived in San Diego. Or 2000, not 2000, 2020 we moved here. December of 2020, so for 51 years I lived in San Diego. From the time I was 9 till I was 61, I guess it was 60. I was almost 61. I turned 61 when we moved here. But anyway, so I'll be rooting for the Padres, and I'll root for anybody who plays the Dodgers, so it doesn't matter who it is, but I want the Padres to win it all at this point. They've I want to see Padres and Cleveland is who I'm rooting for. I'd love to see that Cleveland Guardians and San Diego Padre World Series. That'd be my ideal World Series. I know it'd be horrible for the networks, but they'd probably hate it. If you get LA and New York out of there, no Chicago teams. Oh, man, this is good. Every time I smoke this pipe, I just fall madly in love with this pipe every single time I smoke it. Mm-hmm. I don't know if Briar Dude is still making pipes, but I don't know if you can see the grain on that or not, if it's really showing up, but boy, it's got some beautiful grain on that pipe too. It's a beauty. It's got some amazing grain. And it's got a nice big bowl on it. He kind of modeled it after a 320, but it's got an even bigger bowl. This one definitely has that gear shift feel to it that I just love. He He made one for old Pops. A little bit, his is a little smaller than this. That old Pops calls a songwriter, and I just fell in love with that when I first saw old Pops. And one day he decided to make me one, and make it. He said he made it big enough that I could smoke it and listen to the entire version of Mountain Jam by the Allman Brothers while smoking it. So it's a big pipe. Oh. And Mountain Jam is on the Eat a Peach album. And there's an instrumental on there called Le Briar, which means the brothers in Cajun French. And so that's what I called this pipe, is Le Briar, for the brothers. What a great smoking pipe. And it just gets better every time I smoke it. That's the amazing thing about it. It just, as most pipes do, the more you smoke them, the better they smoke. But this one, the draw seems to get better on it every time I smoke it. So good. So using this little tamper here that I made from a piece of wood I got at the Persinger cemetery, where the two brothers, Civil War soldier brothers, were buried. The house by where we used to live when we first moved here. It was that little family cemetery. I'll put a picture right here. It was the two Confederate soldiers who were killed in the Civil War. One was killed in the Wilderness Campaign, and the other one was taken prisoner of war and died in a prisoner of war camp in Maryland. And they were both Persingers. Adolphus was he died in the prisoner of war camp, and I can't remember the name of the other who was killed in the Fort Wilderness campaign, where I believe Stonewall Jackson was killed in that campaign. He was one of Stonewall Jackson's soldiers. And I can't remember his first name. It'll be on the tombstones. I can't remember his name now. But they're both buried there with their parents and a sister and an infant, and I think another family member was buried in that cemetery. It's a little family cemetery that had been covered up with grapevines over the years, and a husband and a wife bought a house. This was a vacant lot, and it was just covered over with trash, and back in the 60s had been covered over with trash and grapevines. This husband and wife bought their house in the 60s and decided to clean up that vacant lot. While they were cleaning it up, they discovered these tombstones. And they decided they would maintain this cemetery. And they've maintained it since the 60s, the 1960s. The husband is now gone, and the wife is an elderly lady. I've met her and talked to her, and very nice lady. And she's now on the Roanoke Historical Board or something like that, I think she said. And the historical board now maintains that area. But for years, she and her husband were the ones who took care of that, and they, brought that, cleaned it all out, cleaned the whole vacant lot out, took out all the vines, and maintained that graveyard there. And so I found this little stick there one day while I was up there. I used to go walking around that neighborhood every day, and I would smoke my pipe. But every day I would stop at that cemetery and pay my respects to that family and say a prayer for the family and the fallen soldiers. And she came out one time when I was up there and asked me if I was kin, and I said no. I just pay my respects every time I walk by here, and so we talked a few times when I would walk by, and she'd be out there. But I found that stick one day, and I thought I would make a tamper from that little cemetery there, have that for my collection, since that was a place that I found a lot of peace when I first moved here. Very peaceful place, and I used to spend a lot of time there every day. I'd walk by there and stop and spend 10-15 minutes just contemplating and thinking about what that family had been through, in that time in our country's history, and the great loss that family had suffered. And not being from this area, originally being from California, and not being immersed in that history, although being a huge Civil War history buff, having that history right there where I could walk by it every day was very interesting for me, and it brought it to life for me. And just thinking about the loss that that family suffered, and thinking about the magnitude of loss that our country as a whole suffered, both sides, was immense. And to think that there are, people now who are even considering that again is ridiculous. And in my opinion, that the loss today would be far greater, more horrendous than what was suffered back then. Were something like that to ever happen again. And God forbid that were even contemplated. But I used to just sit there and just think about, the magnitude of suffering and loss that this family suffered alone, and then compound that by 600,000 families across the country, when our country was much smaller than it is now. I mean, they figured I think it was 1 in 6 families suffered a loss in the Civil War. Something like that, 1 in 10 or something. That's huge. That's a huge loss. 600,000 men died. We had 6 million Americans at the time, so 1 in 10. There's a huge amount of loss suffered across our country. When you really stop and think of the magnitude of loss suffered, 1 in 10 Americans died in that war. When you think about the wounded, horribly wounded, horrifically wounded, and the crude medical they had back then, and the weaponry we had back then was, the low velocity weapons. When they struck, they ripped the limbs off. They didn't pierce, they didn't go through, they ripped limbs off. It was a terrible to think about. But anyway, don't know why I got off on that tangent, but anyway, I will catch y'all later. Have a good one. God bless. Take care. I will catch y'all later.